The day my life imploded started with a knock at 7 a.m. and ended with my parents doubling my rent, just so my unemployed sister could crash on my sofa. It was a betrayal that shattered everything I thought I knew about family, and it forced me to make a choice I never thought I'd have to make. My name is Allison, and for 28 years, I thought I had the perfect life. I was a social media marketer at a booming agency downtown, pulling in a decent salary. I had this incredible one-bedroom apartment, my sanctuary, which my parents owned and rented to me at a steal. I'd poured my heart and soul into making it my own. A plush sofa I'd saved for, a refinished coffee table, shelves bursting with books and records, a Vitamix blender, and an espresso machine. Every single item had a story, a memory, a piece of my independence. I was on track, saving 20% of every paycheck, dreaming of a down payment on my own home in just 3 years. My life was meticulously planned, brick by brick, and I was genuinely proud of it. But my family, that was always the wild card. Especially my sister, Stephanie, 3 years my junior. She was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While I worked part-time jobs through college, she cruised through an expensive private university, changing majors 3 times, all expenses paid. When she needed a car, it appeared in the driveway. When I needed one, I got a loan with interest. When Stephanie lost a job, she moved back home, rent-free. When I was laid off early in my career, my parents offered me a loan, with interest. I love my family, but I'd long ago accepted the double standards. My apartment, my independence, that was my quiet victory, a place where the rules didn't quite reach. Then came the warning signs. 2 weeks before the explosion, Stephanie texted me out of the blue. Odd. Then my mom called, mentioning Stephanie's breakup and how she quit her job at a boutique. I remember the uneasy twist in my gut when Mom said, "Your sister is going through such a difficult time. Family needs to stick together." I nodded, sympathetic, completely oblivious to the hurricane heading my way. That night, scrolling Pinterest, planning a kitchen backsplash, I had no idea my world would be torn apart by a single knock on the door. It was precisely 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. The insistent pounding ripped me from a ray-deep sleep. Disoriented, I stumbled to the door in my pajamas, expecting a package, maybe a maintenance emergency. But when I swung it open, there stood Stephanie, with 2 massive suitcases, a duffel bag, and her designer purse. Her eyes were puffy, her hair a messy ponytail, but she forced a sickeningly cheerful, "Hey sis. Surprise. I'll be staying with you for a while." I stood there, frozen, my brain sputtering. "Stephanie, what are you talking about? What are you doing here?" She pushed past me, her luggage wheels scraping my pristine floors. Mark cheated. Can you believe it? And my boss was totally unreasonable about me needing time off, so I quit. I can't deal with toxic work environments on top of heartbreak. I closed the door, my mind racing. "I'm sorry, really. But Steph, this is a one-bedroom apartment. There's no space for you. Why didn't you go to Mom and Dad's?" She flopped dramatically onto my sofa. "The house is being renovated. Remember? The guest room is torn apart. Besides, Dad snores so loud, and Mom's on this kale and quinoa kick. I'd go crazy there." She looked around my apartment, almost admiringly. "This place is perfect. You always had great taste, ally." I winced at the childhood nickname. "Stephanie, I work from home 2 days a week. I need my space. This really won't work." Just then, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Allison, your sister is there, right?" Mom didn't wait for confirmation. "I want you to make her feel welcome. She's going through a very difficult time." I tried to be reasonable. "Mom, I understand, but my apartment is too small. Maybe we could help her find her own place. Or she could stay with Jessica," I suggested, referring to Stephanie's friend with a 2-bedroom. "Jessica isn't family," my mother shot back, her voice sharp. "Family takes care of each other. This is not the time to be selfish." I walked into the kitchen, keeping my voice low. "It's not about being selfish, Mom. There's literally no space here. I don't have an extra bedroom." She can sleep on the couch. It's temporary until she gets back on her feet. The tone was not a suggestion. It was an expectation. How temporary are we talking? I asked, watching Stephanie unpack her toiletries and arrange them on my coffee table. As long as she needs, Mom replied vaguely. Now stop being difficult. I raised you better than this. Do I need to get your father involved? The threat hung heavy in the air. I knew the script. Fine, I conceded, defeat weighing in my voice. She can stay for now, but we need to figure out a more permanent solution. That's my good girl, Mom chirped, instantly warm again. After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen, watching Stephanie rearrange my throw pillows and place her framed photos next to mine. A wave of invasion washed over me, but I swallowed it. The couch pulls out into a bed, I said, forcing a neutral tone. We'll need to put it back during the day so I can work. I have meetings from home Tuesdays and Thursdays. Stephanie barely looked up. Actually, I was thinking I'd take the bedroom. The living room gets so much light in the morning, and you know I'm not a morning person. Plus, I have all these clothes that need to be hung up. I stared at her, disbelief rising. Stephanie, this is my apartment. I am not giving up my bedroom. She looked at me with the same expression she'd used on our parents for years, a perfect blend of hurt and indignation. Wow, ally, I just lost my boyfriend and my job. I'm at my lowest point, and you can't even make a small sacrifice. I held my ground. You can have a couch. That's already a compromise. The standoff might have continued, but my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Be kind to your sister. Remember all the time she was there for you. I couldn't recall these supposed instances, but I knew this battle wasn't worth fighting. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. You can use the living room, but we need to establish some ground rules. Stephanie's face instantly brightened. You're the best sister ever. This is going to be so fun, like when we were kids and shared a room. I didn't have the heart to remind her those days had been anything but idyllic. By the way, if you're still with me and wondering how much more of this I had to endure, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. The first week of cohabitation was pure chaos. While I woke at 7 a.m., Stephanie rarely stirred before noon. My once peaceful living room was now a bizarre blend of bedroom, fashion boutique, and makeup studio. During client video calls, I had to contort myself, angling my laptop to avoid showing the blanket-strewn sofa, the scattered makeup, and clothes hanging from every doorknob. My boss even commented on my unusual background. I mumbled about redecorating, vowing to talk to Stephanie. But talking to Stephanie was like talking to a brick wall. When I suggested she look for a job, she dramatically sighed about needing to heal. When I asked her to clean, she promised she would, but never did. When I mentioned the grocery bill, she reminded me of her trauma and need for comfort food. My expensive coffee beans vanished. My meal preps disappeared. Even my secret stash of dark chocolate was raided. One evening, finding her wrapped in my favorite throw blanket, watching reality TV at full volume, I attempted a house rules discussion. She looked up, annoyed. Can it wait until commercial break? No, it cannot. I sat down, pulling out a notepad. Quiet hours, shared expenses, personal space. She actually laughed. Are you seriously giving me a roommate contract? I'm your sister, not some random off Craigslist. That's exactly why we need boundaries, I explained, trying to keep my voice level. She just rolled her eyes, turned back to her show. You've always been so uptight, ally. Just relax. This isn't forever. How long is it then? I pressed. Have you started looking for jobs or apartments? She sighed. Mom and Dad said I could stay here as long as I need to. That was a click. My blood ran cold. Wait, what exactly did Mom and Dad tell you about staying here? Stephanie shrugged. Just that you had plenty of space, could use the company, and since they own the building, it's basically like staying with family anyway. Without another word, I stepped onto my small balcony and called my father. Dad, did you and Mom tell Stephanie she could move in with me indefinitely, without even asking me first? There was a pause. Allison, your sister is going through a difficult time. The apartment is plenty big enough for both of you, temporarily. But it's not temporary, is it? She has no plans to look for a job or her own place, and she's not contributing anything. My father's tone hardened. Your mother and I give you a significant discount on rent. Many people would be grateful for such an arrangement. The implicit message was clear. The apartment wasn't truly mine. It was a family asset, to be reallocated as they saw fit. I'm grateful, I said carefully, but I also need to be able to live my life. Stephanie isn't respecting my space or my things. You've always been the responsible one, Allison, he said, his voice softening into that manipulative tone I knew so well. Stephanie needs that stability right now. Be the big sister. By the time I ended the call, my frustration had curdled into a bitter resignation. It was the same old song and dance. Stephanie's needs always trumped mine. The situation spiraled. Stephanie invited friends over without warning, sometimes during my work calls. She borrowed my clothes, returning them stained or stretched. The water bill doubled from her 40-minute showers. Electricity spiked from her endless styling tools. My peaceful mornings were shattered, my quiet evenings impossible. My work suffered. I missed a deadline, something I'd never done. My boss, Diane, pulled me aside, concerned. Family can be complicated, she said. Just don't let it affect your work for too long. The Henderson account is too important. I started staying late at the office, finding excuses to be anywhere but my own apartment, which now felt like a battleground. One night, finding my expensive face serum emptied, I broke down in tears in my bathroom. I called Laura, my lifeline. I can't do this anymore. I'm a guest in my own home. My parents won't listen. Stephanie won't change. I feel trapped. Have you considered looking for another apartment? Laura suggested gently. I can't afford something comparable, I wailed. My parents charge me 30% below market. Maybe not comparable, Laura acknowledged, but something that is yours, where you make the rules. Is your sanity worth the price difference? As I looked around my once peaceful sanctuary, now suffocating under Stephanie's presence, I realized Laura was right. But before I could seriously consider it, things took an even more dramatic turn. Exactly 1 month after Stephanie moved in, my father called. His tone was unnervingly formal. Allison, your mother and I would like to have a family discussion this evening. It's important that both you and Stephanie are present. We'll come by around 7 p.m. A cold dread settled in my stomach. What was this about? When I got home, Stephanie had, for the first time, tied it up. She seemed unusually quiet, checking her phone. Do you know what this meeting is about? I asked, suspicion growing. She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. Dad just said they wanted to talk to us both. At precisely 7 p.m., my parents arrived. Mom brought a casserole. Dad carried a manila folder, which immediately set off alarm bells in my head. We sat around my small dining table, the one I'd lovingly restored. My mother served the casserole while my father cleared his throat and opened the folder. Allison, as you know, your sister has been staying with you for the past month. Given that the living arrangement appears to be working out, we need to make some adjustments to your rental agreement. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. What kind of adjustments? My father slid a paper across the table. We will need to increase your rent, starting next month. The new amount will be double what you are currently paying. I nearly choked. Double? Why would you double my rent? Well, there are 2 people living in the apartment now, my mother chimed in, as if this explained everything. That means twice the utilities, twice the wear and tear. But Stephanie isn't paying anything. I pointed out, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. She doesn't have a job. Which is exactly why we need to adjust your rent, my father explained, with the patient tone he used when he thought I was being obtuse. We need to cover the additional expenses Stephanie incurs while she's getting back on her feet. I looked at Stephanie, who was studying her plate intently, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She had known. Of course, she had known. Let me get this straight, I said slowly, every word dripping with disbelief. You want me to pay double rent to cover Stephanie living here, even though I didn't invite her, even though I don't have space for her, and I'm already dealing with increased costs and disruption to my life. Now, Allison, my mother said, her voice taking on that warning tone. Stephanie is family. Family supports each other during difficult times. Then why is the support always one-directional? I asked, my voice cracking. Why am I always the one expected to give while Stephanie only takes? My father frowned. That's unfair, Allison. Your sister has had some bad luck recently. Bad luck, or bad choices. The words slipped out before I could stop them. The table fell silent. Stephanie's eyes welled with tears on cue, a talent she had perfected over the years. I can't believe you'd say something so cruel. My mother scolded. After everything we've done for you, giving you this beautiful apartment at below market rent for years. I've paid rent faithfully every month. I counted. I've maintained the apartment, improved it. Even this was a business arrangement that benefited both parties. And now the arrangement is changing, my father said firmly. The new rent will be effective from the 1st of next month. That gives you 2 weeks to adjust your budget. I looked down at the paper. The new amount would eat up nearly 70% of my monthly income. It would obliterate my savings, making my future plans impossible. I can't afford this, I said simply. Not on my current salary. Then perhaps you should look for a better-paying job, my father suggested, completely unconcerned. Or take on some freelance work. You're always talking about those side hustles people do nowadays. The casualness with which he dismissed my entire financial reality made something snap inside me. Years of being the responsible one, watching Stephanie receive endless second chances while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition, culminated in this moment. Oh, I said, my voice steady despite the anger and hurt swirling inside me. I could just move out. There was a moment of stunned silence before all three of them burst into laughter. Move out to where? My mother asked, between chuckles. Do you have any idea what rental prices are like right now? You wouldn't find anything close to what you have here, even at the increased rate, my father added confidently. Your whole life is here, Stephanie chimed in. All your stuff, your routine. You wouldn't really leave. Their dismissive laughter felt like a physical blow. They truly believed I was trapped, that I had no choice but to accept their terms. Weiss, they thought I lacked the courage to strike out on my own. I will start looking for a new place tomorrow, I said quietly. My father waved his hand dismissively. Allison, don't be dramatic. Just sign the new agreement and we can all enjoy this lovely dinner your mother made. I took the pen he offered, held it over the paper for a long moment, then set it down without signing. I'll let you know my decision by the end of the week, I said. The rest of dinner passed in an uncomfortable silence, broken only by my parents and Stephanie discussing her vague plans to find herself. I remained silent, a storm brewing inside me. After they left, Stephanie acted as if nothing had happened, turning on the TV. They are right, you know, she said casually. You wouldn't really move out. This place is too perfect, and you hate change. In that moment, watching her lounge on my furniture, using my Netflix, eating my food, speaking with such entitled certainty, something clicked. This wasn't just about the rent. This was about respect, about boundaries, about standing up for myself in a family dynamic that had been broken for far too long. I went to bed without responding, but I lay awake for hours, my mind racing. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next day, I called in sick to work for the first time in over a year. As soon as Stephanie left for her daily coffee shop networking session, I sat down at my dining table. First, my finances. My 20% savings rate had built a substantial emergency fund, enough for first and last month's rent, security deposit, and moving expenses. I calculated my true maximum affordable rent based on 30% of my income. It was sobering, significantly less than even my current rent, meaning compromises would have to be made. Next, I called 3 real estate agents. 2 were doubtful. The third, a woman named Vanessa, was optimistic. The market's tight, but not impossible, she assured me, especially if you're willing to consider neighborhoods a bit further out or slightly smaller spaces. While waiting, I pulled out my lease. After the initial year, I was on a month-to-month agreement, requiring 30 days' notice. More importantly, there was no clause about furniture. Everything I'd purchased was mine. My parents had only provided the built-in appliances. To be sure, I texted Laura, whose brother was a real estate attorney. Her brother confirmed, unless specifically stated, any furniture I purchased was mine. Armed with this, I felt a surge of power. By the end of the day, Vanessa sent 5 listings. The next day, I toured all of them. The 5th apartment was tiny, just 500 square feet, but recently renovated, in a secure building with on-site laundry. It was further out, but on a direct bus line. Best of all, the landlord was willing to work with my tight timeline and offered a discount if I could move in within 10 days. I signed the lease on the spot, putting down a deposit. I felt a strange mix of anxiety and exhilaration. I had just committed to a complete upheaval of my life in 48 hours. Back at my soon-to-be former apartment, I began planning the logistics. Moving companies were out, so I reached out to my friends. Within hours, I had a volunteer crew. 6 people, 2 pickup trucks, an SUV. Laura offered her garage for temporary storage, and her contractor boyfriend volunteered to help disassemble furniture. The final piece of my plan involved timing. I checked my parents' social media. My mother had been posting about an upcoming family reunion at my aunt's house, a 3-hour drive away. They'd be gone Friday evening until Sunday afternoon. Stephanie, always eager for family attention, had confirmed her attendance. This was my window. I scheduled the move for Saturday. A growing sense of resolve filled me. This wasn't just about escaping an unfair financial situation. This was about finally standing up for myself and changing a family dynamic that had been unhealthy for far too long. The night before my parents' planned ultimatum meeting, I texted my father. I have made my decision about the apartment. I will discuss it with you when you return from Aunt Jean's on Sunday. He responded immediately. We need to resolve this before the weekend. Allison, your mother and I expect you to be reasonable. I didn't reply. For once, I wouldn't be following their script. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparations. I arranged mail forwarding, scheduled utility transfers, and discreetly packed essentials while Stephanie was out. I withdrew cash and meticulously organized my receipts for every major item. By Friday evening, as I watched Stephanie pack an overnight bag for the reunion, an odd calm settled over me. She had no idea that when she returned, the apartment and our relationship would be transformed. Are you sure you won't come? She asked as she headed out the door. Mom says Aunt Jean really wants to see you. I have too much work to catch up on, I replied truthfully. As her rideshare pulled away, I looked around the apartment that had been my home for 5 years. By tomorrow, it would look very different, and so would my life. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, as if the universe was approving. I'd barely slept, a mix of anxiety and adrenaline. By 6 a.m., I was sorting final items. My phone buzzed with a text from Laura. Operation Independence Day is a go. Troops arriving at 0800 hours. I smiled. By 7:30, Laura arrived with coffee and bagels, followed by her boyfriend, Marcus, with his toolkit. Within the hour, the rest of my crew assembled. Okay, everyone, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Thank you all so much for helping today. The plan is to have everything out by 4 p.m. Big furniture first, then boxes, then small loose items. We worked with surprising efficiency. Marcus and his friend handled the large pieces. Laura and others formed a box brigade. By noon, my bedroom was empty, the kitchen half-packed, the living room furniture ready. We broke for a quick lunch on the floor. How are you feeling? Laura asked quietly. I considered it. Sad, angry, relieved, proud, all of it at once. She squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing. This is long overdue. The afternoon continued at a relentless pace. We made 3 trips to my new apartment, carefully arranging furniture and stacking boxes. My new landlord, surprised by our efficiency, commented, "Most moves I see are complete chaos. You folks have a system." By 3 p.m., we were down to the final items. The apartment that had been so carefully furnished now stood eerily empty. Only the built-in appliances and blinds remained. Everything else, from the shower curtain to the lamps, was mine, packed away. I did a final walkthrough. In the kitchen, I left an envelope on the counter, my keys, the next month's rent check, as required by my 30-day notice, and a brief, factual, unemotional letter stating I was terminating the agreement and had taken only my possessions. As I stood in the empty living room for the last time, Laura put her arm around my shoulders. "Ready?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. With one final look, I closed and locked the door behind me. The reaction came sooner than I expected. We had just finished the final trip to my new apartment and was celebrating with pizza and beer when my phone exploded. First, a series of texts from Stephanie. "What the hell? Allison. Where's all the furniture? Where am I supposed to sleep? Mom and Dad are furious." Then came the calls. My mother first, then my father, then my mother again. I let them all go to voicemail, needing time to compose myself. When I finally listened, my mother's voice was hysterical. "Allison, what have you done? We came home to find the apartment completely empty. Is this some kind of joke? Call me immediately." My father's message was colder, more threatening. "This is completely unacceptable behavior, Allison. That furniture belongs in that apartment. You have violated your lease agreement. Call me back now before I have to take legal action." I waited until my friends had left, thanking them profusely, before finally calling my father back. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "Explain yourself," he demanded without preamble. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "I decided to move out, as I told you I might. I gave proper notice as required by the lease, paid the final month's rent, and took my belongings with me." "Your belongings?" he sputtered. "That furniture belongs in the apartment." "Actually, no," I replied calmly. "Every piece of furniture in that apartment was purchased by me with my own money. I have receipts for everything if you'd like to see them. The lease makes no mention of any furnishings provided by the landlord, which would be you and Mom." There was a moment of stunned silence before he recovered. "This is not about legalities, Allison. This is about your sister having nowhere to sleep tonight. The apartment is completely empty. There are air mattresses at Target for under $50, I suggested. Or she could stay at your house. The guest room renovations must be finished by now, right?" Another silence, longer this time. I realized with sudden clarity that there probably never had been any renovations. It had been an excuse, nothing more. "Where are you?" he finally asked. "I have a new apartment," I said, not volunteering the address. "It's smaller, but it's mine." "This is not over," he warned. "Your mother is beside herself. Stephanie is crying. Is that what you wanted? To hurt your family?" The guilt trip almost worked. Almost. But I held firm. "What I wanted was to be treated with respect," I replied evenly. "What I wanted was for my boundaries to be acknowledged. What I wanted was to not have my kindness taken for granted. So this is revenge? Some kind of childish tantrum because we asked you to help your sister?" "No, Dad. This is me making a choice about my own life. I paid rent for the final 30 days as required. Stephanie can stay there if she wants, but she will need to get her own furniture." I heard my mother's voice in the background, demanding the phone. There was a rustling, and then her tear-filled voice came through. "How could you do this to your sister, to us, after everything we have done for you?" "Mom," I said gently, "I have done nothing wrong. I simply moved out of an apartment that was no longer working for me, taking my own possessions with me." "But where's Stephanie supposed to sleep?" "There's nothing left. The same place you would have slept if I had never lived there in the first place. The apartment was unfurnished when I moved in, remember?" That simple fact seemed to stop her short. There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice different now. "You really moved everything out in one day? And you have a new place already? You planned all this?" "Yes." Another pause. "I never thought you would actually leave." There was something in her tone. Not quite respect, but perhaps the beginnings of it. A recognition that I was not the same pushover they had always assumed me to be. The conversation ended shortly after with vague threats about discussions to come and decisions to be made. I hung up, feeling drained, but strangely peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I had drawn a line and held it, despite the emotional manipulation and guilt trips that had always worked in the past. Later that evening, I received a surprising text from my father. "The apartment looks different, empty. I had forgotten what it looked like before you moved in. We will talk more tomorrow." It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was an acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. In the weeks that followed my dramatic departure, I adjusted to life in my new apartment. The space was indeed much smaller, requiring creative organization and some difficult decisions about which possessions to keep. My king-sized bed dominated the bedroom, leaving barely enough space to walk around it. My beloved sectional sofa had to be split into its component pieces to fit the living area. My dining table now served double duty as a desk and eating surface. Yet, despite the constraints, there was a lightness to my new home that had nothing to do with square footage. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt truly in control of my space and my life. Every object was exactly where I wanted it. Every decision, from when to do laundry to what temperature to set the thermostat, was mine alone. The peace that came with this autonomy was worth far more than the extra space I had left behind. I introduced myself to my neighbors, something I had never bothered to do before. To my delight, the woman across the hall was a graphic designer who worked from home and invited me for coffee on our shared rooftop garden. The older gentleman next door offered to water my plants when I traveled. Gradually, I built a small community, creating connections that felt genuine and supportive. Meanwhile, the situation with my family evolved in unexpected ways. Stephanie, faced with an empty apartment and no one to cater to her needs, found herself forced to make changes. According to my mother's reluctant updates, she had taken a part-time job at a local boutique, similar to her previous position. It wasn't much, but it was a start toward financial independence. My parents, after the initial shock and anger subsided, seemed to be going through a period of reflection. My father particularly appeared to be reconsidering his role in enabling Stephanie's dependence. During a brief phone conversation 2 weeks after my move, he asked questions about my new place without the judgment I had expected. "Are you managing okay with the budget?" he inquired, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes," I replied honestly. "It's tighter than before, but I'm making it work. The location is actually better for my commute, which saves on transportation costs." "That's good," he said awkwardly. "Your mother and I have been talking about Stephanie, about some patterns we might have encouraged over the years." It was as close to an acknowledgement of their favoritism as I had ever heard. And while it was not an apology, it felt like progress. My relationship with my mother remained strained. She continued to see my actions as a betrayal of family loyalty rather than a necessary step toward healthy boundaries. Our conversations were short and superficial, focusing on weather and work rather than the emotional elephant in the room. Stephanie, surprisingly, was the first to reach out in a meaningful way. A month after my departure, she texted, asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, curious about what she wanted, but determined to maintain my boundaries. We met at a neutral cafe halfway between our respective homes. She looked different somehow, with less makeup and simpler clothes than her usual stylish outfits. "So," she said after we had ordered our drinks, "your new place is good." "It is," I confirmed. "Different, but good." She nodded, fidgeting with her napkin. "I didn't think you would really leave." "None of us did." "I know it was kind of badass, actually," she admitted with a small smile. The look on Dad's face when we walked into that empty apartment. Despite myself, I laughed. "It wasn't about revenge, you know." "I know that now." She looked down at her coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about all that stuff, about how I've always expected people to take care of me. How I never really had to face consequences because someone always bailed me out." I remained silent, letting her continue. "When you left, it was like suddenly I had to figure things out. Mom and Dad brought over an air mattress, but it was uncomfortable and I hated it. So, I got a job to buy my own bed. And once I started working again, I realized I actually like having my own money, not having to ask for everything." "That's great, Steph," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "I'm still staying at the apartment," she added quickly. But I'm paying rent now. Not much, but something. And I'm looking for a roommate situation for when the lease ends. We talked for nearly 2 hours, longer than we had spoken in years. For the first time, it felt like a conversation between equals rather than the familiar dynamic of her taking and me giving. As we parted, she hugged me awkwardly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for being such a terrible sister." "You weren't terrible," I corrected her. "We just had unhealthy patterns, all of us." The healing process with my family continued slowly over the following months. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. My mother still occasionally tried to make me feel guilty for abandoning Stephanie. My father still sometimes slipped into his authoritative role, dispensing unwanted advice. But something fundamental had changed. They could no longer assume my compliance or take my support for granted. Each interaction required mutual respect, or it simply didn't happen. I declined invitations that felt like obligations and accepted only those that felt genuine. I offered help when I could do so without resentment and said no when I could not. 6 months after my move, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my parents' house. The atmosphere was different, tentative, but not unpleasant. Stephanie brought a dessert she had baked herself. I brought a bottle of wine I could genuinely afford. My father carved the turkey with less ceremony than usual, and my mother asked about my new neighbors with what seemed like genuine interest. As we ate, I looked around the table at these people who had shaped me in both positive and negative ways. I felt neither the resentment that had driven me away, nor the desperate need for approval that had kept me compliant for so long. Instead, I felt a calm acceptance, a recognition that we were all flawed individuals doing our best with the emotional tools we had. The greatest lesson I learned through this experience was not about furniture or apartments, or even money. It was about the difference between love and enabling, between generosity and being taken advantage of. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to set clear boundaries and hold them firm, even when it is painful. I also discovered the value of true independence, not just financial but emotional. The security of knowing I could stand on my own, make difficult decisions, and navigate their consequences gave me a confidence that permeated every aspect of my life. My work improved, my friendships deepened, and my sense of self strengthened. Today, 1 year after that dramatic moving day, I sit in my small but cherished apartment, surrounded by the same furniture that once filled a larger space, but now feels perfectly right for where I am. I have added new pieces chosen specifically for this home, and let go of others that no longer served me. In many ways, that is what the entire experience taught me about life. We hold on to relationships, patterns, and expectations that once fit, but may have become uncomfortable or constraining. Having the courage to assess what truly serves us, to keep what nurtures our growth, and release what restricts, is perhaps the most important skill we can develop. If you have ever found yourself in a situation where your kindness was mistaken for weakness, where your boundaries were repeatedly crossed, or where you felt trapped by others' expectations, know that you have the right and the power to change that dynamic. It may not be easy, and it may not happen overnight, but taking that first step toward honoring your own needs can transform not just your life, but the lives of those around you in ways you might never expect. What would you have done in my place? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.